One stage, two powerful women, and a moment that shocked the nation. When progressive Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett took the mic, she had no idea who was watching from the front row. Conservative firebrand Caroline Levitt, ready to challenge her face-to-face. What started as a political confrontation quickly turned personal, emotional, and unforgettable. You won't believe what was said, or how it ended. Post in the comments where are you watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest stories. In the heart of Washington, D.C., as the city simmered with relentless political fervor and the heated debates of the season, Jasmine Crockett stood alone in her private dressing room, deep in preparation for her moment on stage. The weight of history and the promise of a transformative future lay heavily upon her shoulders. A progressive congresswoman from Texas with a reputation for delivering unapologetically bold speeches, Jasmine was known not only for her fierce advocacy for equality, social justice, and expanded civil rights, but also for the personal sacrifices that had paved her journey from grassroots activism to Capitol Hill. As she adjusted the microphone in front of her mirror, Jasmine's reflections stared back at her with quiet determination mingled with vulnerability. The delicate hum of whispered encouragement from her trusted aides echoed off the walls, interspersed with the distant clatter of busy Washington corridors and the low rumble of anticipation from the gathering crowd outside the Grand Forum. Every detail of this day was emblematic of the struggle she had endured, from the early days of organizing protests on Texan street corners to the relentless battles in legislative halls. Today, her words were not just rhetoric. They meant hope, progress, and a promise to the future generations who believed that change was not only possible but inevitable. In the backstage area, just off the main auditorium, Jasmine's team huddled together in a flurry of final preparations. Her communications director, Michael, his voice soft yet urgent, relayed the latest buzz. Whispers that the formidable Caroline Levitt had arrived. Caroline, a polarizing conservative commentator and media powerhouse, was notorious for her incendiary rhetoric and ability to rouse controversy wherever she went. Known as a woman of action with a magnetic, uncompromising presence, Caroline's decision to attend wasn't merely that of a curious observer. It was a calculated, deliberate act. A challenge, perhaps a provocation aimed directly at Jasmine's carefully crafted vision of progress and unity. Within the narrow confines of the corridors, the rumor mill churned relentlessly. Young interns exchanged anxious glances, and seasoned political strategists murmured under their breaths. For many, the presence of Caroline Levitt transformed this routine political forum into an arena of ideological combat, where words could strike like arrows, and postured politics could ignite genuine, heartfelt debate. Although Jasmine's supporters radiated confidence and admiration for her achievements, there was an unmistakable undercurrent of tension. The idea that Caroline might seize the moment to confront her openly, to challenge her vision of equality and social justice with a barrage of conservative critiques throughout the evening, loomed as a dark cloud on an otherwise promising day. In the quiet moments before her speech, Jasmine reflected on her long and arduous path to Congress. A journey filled with both painful memories and hard-won victories. The faces of those who had inspired her relentlessly, the activists whose voices she had amplified, and even the quiet sacrifices made by her family along the way flashed vividly in her mind. It was these memories, both bitter and sweet, that fortified her spirit. And now, as she prepared to address an audience hungry for change, each word she would utter was imbued with a personal promise to fight for a future where the marginalized were heard and respected. At the same time, on the opposite side of the room, Caroline Levitt made her entrance. Clad in a sharply tailored suit and exuding of a practiced charisma, Caroline's eyes scanned the room with the cool confidence of someone entirely at home in the spotlight. Despite the buzz and uncertainty that her arrival had stirred among the backstage staff and even the audience as the crowd began to settle, she remained a study in composure. With deliberate steps, Caroline found her place in the front row, not merely to observe but clearly positioned to be seen. Her gaze fixed intently towards the stage where Jasmine would soon command the attention of every camera and critic present. As the final moments before the speech ticked away, a palpable energy electrified the atmosphere. Jasmine, heart-pounding but resolute, adjusted her notes one last time. In that charged pause, As the murmurs in the corridors subsided into a rhythmic silence, she stepped from the wings and walked towards the stage, each step echoing with the determination of a woman who had weathered storms and was ready to face yet another tempest. All eyes turned to her as she ascended the steps, and high above the audience, through the lens of countless cameras, Caroline Levitt's intense gaze locked with Jasmine's steady stride. Thus, in that fateful moment, two divergent visions converged on the same stage, a silent harbinger of the storm of ideas and conflicts that was about to engulf the room. Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the stage with a purposeful stride, her eyes alight with determination and the weight of history. The podium, polished and gleaming under the bright stage lights, awaited the testimony of a woman who had weathered storms to represent the voices of millions. As she adjusted the microphone, the murmuring crowd fell to an expectant hush, their collective anticipation ready to embrace a message of change. In a voice both tender and powerful, Jasmine began her speech, a heartfelt oration that bridged the personal with the universal. She spoke candidly of the deep-seated racism and inequality that continued to mar the fabric of this nation. For too long, our communities have been ignored, our struggles soundly dismissed by those in power, she declared. Each word throbbed with the pain of generations past and the burning desire for a more just future. She recalled the whispered stories of discrimination, the barriers that stifled opportunity, and the quiet, relentless fight for civil rights. Her tone was neither shrill nor angry, but carried a steadfast resolve, imbued with the wisdom of someone who had turned adversity into a rallying cry for change. The narrative wove in poignant memories, of late nights spent organizing protests, of the tears shed in silence over lost opportunities, and of triumphs achieved against overwhelming odds. I stand here today not only as a congresswoman but as a daughter, a sister, and a servant to the countless voices demanding to be heard, Jasmine proclaimed, her voice resonating with both vulnerability and strength. She outlined a vision of progress, a tapestry of policies aimed at dismantling systemic injustice and fostering unity among diverse communities. Her speech was a masterful blend of policy and passion. Statistics were called to account alongside stirring personal testimonies. Calls for reform were underscored by declarations of unwavering hope. As she spoke, the audience was visibly moved. Applause rippled through the crowd, growing steadily as her message of equality and justice took hold. Every pause, every carefully delivered phrase, seemed to echo off the walls of the auditorium. Jasmine's sincerity was undeniable, as was her commitment to combating the long-standing inequities that had defined too much of the societal narrative. Her voice, steady as it soared over the crowd, left no doubt that her fight was deeply personal, rooted in a lifetime of experiences both painful and transformative. Amid the swelling chorus of support from progressive attendees, one presence remained a stark counterpoint, a glare fixated from the front row. Caroline Levitt, the charismatic conservative commentator known as much for her cutting wit as for her challenging perspective, watched silently. Her eyes narrowed with a mixture of appraisal and challenge, reflecting a determination to confront the very assumptions Jasmine's words aimed to dismantle. Caroline's gaze was deliberate, a potent reminder that while many found inspiration in Jasmine's fervor, not every heart in the room was ready to accept this new narrative without question. When Jasmine concluded with a resounding declaration, "Together, we will forge a future where every voice matters, where justice replaces inequality, and where the promise of a truly united nation is ours to claim," the explosion of applause filled the hall with a song of hope. Yet, in that exultant moment of collective triumph, all eyes shifted. As the echoes of cheers began to subside, Caroline Levitt gracefully rose from her seat, her features set in a determined calm. With purposeful steps, she made her way toward the stage, signaling the imminent collision of two divergent visions. This marked the immediate prelude to a showdown that would soon transcend the boundaries of political debate, setting the stage for a confrontation between ideologies. A moment that promised to challenge not only words but the very foundations of truth and justice in this heated political season. After the thunderous applause had faded into an expectant silence, the atmosphere in the auditorium shifted palpably as Caroline Levitt rose from her seat in the front row. With controlled steps and an unyielding gaze, She made her way toward a secondary microphone positioned for post-speech dialogue. The air buzzed with anticipation, the tension nearly tangible as the two formidable women, now separated only by a few feet on the stage, locked eyes. A silent declaration that the political debate was about to become deeply personal. Caroline's voice, steady yet edged with a cool determination, cut through the lingering echoes of Jasmine's impassioned call for change. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, addressing Jasmine by name as she paced slowly toward the podium. "Your speech was stirring, no doubt, but I must ask, where is the specificity? Where are the concrete actions that your rhetoric promises to deliver?" Her tone was measured, but each word struck with deliberate force. "We all hear demands for justice and calls for reform, but how do you plan to translate these ideals into policies that bring about measurable change in the lives of everyday Americans?" For a moment, the room held its breath. Jasmine's eyes, still shining with the residue of her earlier fervor, narrowed slightly as she prepared herself for the onslaught. Taking a deliberate pause before responding, she reminded herself why she had climbed this political ladder despite the constant barrage of skeptics and detractors. "I've always believed that progress cannot be dictated by mere statistics alone," Jasmine replied, her voice calm but resonant with emotion. "Change is both seen and felt. I advocate for policies that dismantle systemic barriers and uplift marginalized communities. Policies that take time to show their full impact. The work we do is measured in lives transformed, not just numbers on a ledger." Caroline's response was swift and incisive. "But talk is cheap when it comes to accountability. Your supporters praise your passion, yet many wonder if it's enough. Concrete plans require measurable, immediate actions. Can you specify which bill or program will guarantee a reduction in inequality? Or whose blueprint you're following to repair the deep-seated racial wounds in our society?" The question struck closer to home than Jasmine had anticipated. In the subtle cadence of Caroline's voice lay the insinuation that Jasmine's words were little more than lofty ideals without the grit of pragmatic policy. The crowd, now riveted by the exchange, listened intently as the debate honed in on not just political theories, but on the personal histories that had molded both women. Jasmine's gaze faltered ever so slightly, as images of protest marches in sweltering heat, the long nights organizing rallies, and the tearful accounts of friends whose lives had been upended by injustice flooded her mind. With a deep, steadying breath, she leaned forward to meet Caroline's challenge. "I recognize the urgency for practical solutions," Jasmine responded, her tone becoming more impassioned as she fought to maintain composure. "Every policy I advocate for is built upon my lived experience and the stories of people who have suffered from neglect and discrimination. I know that real transformation can't happen overnight. Yes, our vision demands immediate action, but it also requires a long-term commitment to structural change." Her words, while still measured, revealed a vulnerability born of years of struggle. A truth that this battle was personal, not just political. The intensity of their exchange began to draw the attention of everyone present. Reporters leaned forward, smartphones were raised, and the auditorium's grand space became the arena for a clash of ideologies. Caroline's tone softened slightly, though it retained an edge. "Tell me, Congresswoman, isn't it true that while you champion reform on a grand scale, the practical steps often fall short? Where is the accountability for promises made to those who have already been let down by systemic failures?" Her words, laced with a hint of personal challenge, evoked a murmur among the onlookers, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. For a fleeting moment, silence reigned, heavy with the weight of personal histories intermingling with public duty. Jasmine's features hardened as she recalled the hardships endured. The sleepless nights worrying over inequities in her community, the relentless battles with bureaucratic indifference, the heartbreak of watching loved ones suffer due to policies that favored convenience over justice. "I have never taken shortcuts to advocate for those who cannot fight for themselves," she said, her voice trembling with both controlled anger and sorrow. "Every step I take, every bill I support, is driven by the memory of those lost opportunities and the tears of families who deserve better." The conversation began to pivot from abstract policy debates to a profound sharing of personal journeys. Caroline, whose own path was marked by a career forged in the crucible of media scrutiny and public confrontation, couldn't help but reference her own struggles, though with a markedly different narrative. "My journey wasn't paved with tragedies," she remarked coolly, "but with the hard lessons of facing a society that demands accountability, even if it means challenging respected figures. We operate in a world where the truth must be spoken, and I challenge you to not only stand by your ideals, but also to prove that they yield tangible progress for the people you represent." As Caroline's words echoed through the hall, Jasmine's expression flickered with a mix of defiance and sorrow. The debate was no longer merely a clash of political ideologies. It had become a reflective confrontation of two women who had each endured, in their own ways, the sting of public cynicism and personal sacrifice. In that charged moment, as each woman recounted the hardships that had defined their paths, the protests fought in blistering heat, the quiet moments of despair, the private toll of having to continuously prove one's worth, the audience felt as though they were witnessing not merely a political debate, but the raw, unfiltered exchange of two souls aching for a better tomorrow. The stage, bathed in the stark glow of stage lights and framed by a sea of flashing cameras, bore witness to every nuance. A microcosm of a nation divided yet desperate for unity. Neither side yielded fully as the dialogue deepened. Instead, the confrontation magnified the gulf of experience and perspective between them. Their voices, at once both harsh and heartfelt, resonated as a call to the broader audience to confront uncomfortable truths. That real change is as much an emotional battle as it is a legislative one, and that the fight for justice often demands personal sacrifice, resilience, and an unyielding commitment to truth. In that crucible of political and personal revelation, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Caroline Levitt marked a turning point. One that promised to ripple far beyond the confines of that auditorium, challenging every viewer to reconsider what it truly means to stand for change in today's world. For a seemingly fleeting moment, the tension on stage escalated to a fever pitch when Caroline Levitt, with a tone laced in biting sarcasm, let slip a comment that passed the point of mere political critique and struck directly at Jasmine's most guarded sanctuary, her family. The remark, framed as an ostensibly innocuous jab about the personal sacrifices and family values that supposedly underpinned Jasmine's political journey, landed like a sledgehammer. It insinuated that Jasmine's lineage and the personal trials she so fervently championed as evidence of her integrity might actually be nothing more than a convenient narrative for voter appeal. The words echoed in the charged silence as if daring Jasmine to respond. At first, a momentary stillness held the audience, and even Caroline paused, anticipating a measured response. But then, something in Jasmine's eyes shifted. The carefully maintained composure that had defined her entire public career began to fracture. In that instant, memories came flooding in. The long, grueling nights when her mother's gentle hands wiped away her tears after yet another bitter disappointment. The whispered promises of hope in a modest dining room where every meal was a testament to resilience. The sacrifices of her siblings who quietly bore their own wounds. All of these, the weight of countless personal victories and losses, converged in a single, overwhelming surge of raw emotion. With a voice that wavered first, then steadily rose into a clear, resounding demand to be heard, Jasmine exploded beyond the confines of prepared political rhetoric. "Caroline, how dare you?" she began, her voice trembling with both fury and heartbreak. "You stand here questioning the very foundation of my being, reducing my family's struggle to a convenient talking point meant to tarnish my advocacy for real change." The intensity in her gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of every listener, as if to imprint her truth on every soul present. Her words spilled forth like a torrential outpouring of years of pent-up pain, grief, and passion. "My family has never enjoyed the luxury of indifference," she continued, her tone rising with each syllable. "Every scar, every tear, every sacrifice was a brick in the road that I walk today. Do you know what it means to grow up watching your parents toil and sacrifice so that you could have a chance? A chance to speak for those who are ignored, to stand in defiance of a system that sees us as disposable? Your audacity to imply that my family's journey is a mere backdrop to my political story is not only insulting. It is a dismissive attempt to silence the lived realities of those who have been subjugated, overlooked, and dehumanized for far too long. My mother, who battled every day with the indignities forced upon her by an unjust society, taught me that strength is born not from privilege but from the courage to rise after every fall. My siblings and I carry the legacy of every whispered apology, every broken promise, every moment when our existence was questioned. This is the truth that fuels my fight, a fight forged by the relentless love and sacrifice of a family that refused to be erased. As Jasmine's voice crescendoed, the familiar cadence of political speeches dissolved into a raw, cathartic monologue. The words were laced with an unyielding mix of sorrow and defiance, a declaration that the struggles of her past were neither a footnote nor a rhetorical device, but the essence of her very being. The polished veneer of political decorum fell away, replaced by the unvarnished emotion of a woman who had finally reached the limits of what could be contained. The auditorium, which had just moments before been a battleground of clashing ideologies, now stood in suspended silence. The force of Jasmine's words reverberated through the space, leaving no doubt about the personal cost behind her public crusade. Even Caroline's sharp features paled momentarily as the profound vulnerability and raging anger in Jasmine's outburst transformed the discourse from a political sparring match into an indelible testament of human endurance. In that charged moment, every eye in the room bore witness to a powerful truth. When the fight for justice is deeply intertwined with one's own history, the lines between personal and political blur until they become inseparable. Jasmine's explosive declaration shattered the remaining pretense of civility on stage, forcing everyone present, and, soon, an audience around the nation, to confront the raw emotion behind the pursuit of truth and equality. The atmosphere, once bristling with competitive rhetoric, now pulsed with the palpable energy of a woman laying bare the soul of her struggle. There was no turning back. Jasmine had not only defended her family's honor, but had also lit a spark that would compel the nation to reevaluate the true cost of systemic injustice. In the wake of the intense confrontation, as Jasmine's raw outburst reverberated throughout the auditorium, the cameras were never far behind. Within seconds, smartphones were raised in unison, capturing every tear, every tremor, every flicker of emotion on both women's faces. The flash of cell phone screens, once a peripheral detail, now dominated the scene as attendees and media personnel alike documented the unfolding drama in real time. As the footage began to circulate on social media, it wasn't long before the video went viral. Within an hour, hashtags like #JasmineUnleashed, #TruthOnStage, and #WomenWhoSpeakOut spread like wildfire across platforms, drawing a vast mosaic of responses from a polarized nation. Progressive voices hailed Jasmine's unabashed vulnerability and the fierce passion behind her words, describing the moment as a cathartic revolution, a long-overdue admission of the personal costs of fighting an unjust system. For many, this display of raw emotion symbolized the human toll of systemic inequalities and offered an authentic insight into the sacrifices made by leaders who truly live the struggles they seek to ameliorate. At the same time, conservative pundits and supporters of Caroline Levitt began to tout her measured approach, arguing that while emotion is powerful, it must be tempered by pragmatism. Commentaries emerged that challenged the effectiveness of venting personal pain over presenting comprehensive policy, insisting that accountability and tangible results were the true measures of leadership. In various news segments, panels were set up where experts debated the merits of authenticity versus stoicism in political discourse, and how the balance of emotional rhetoric and realistic proposals could shape future legislative battles. Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere shifted even further. Although the tension had not entirely dissipated, the collective focus on the recorded event fostered a sense of historic gravity. Audience members, previously silent participants, now found themselves discussing the implications of what they had witnessed. Some exchanged reflective nods and whispered conversations, discussions that underscored the profound impact of the moment on public consciousness. Even members of Jasmine's team, gathered around portable monitors backstage, were visibly moved as they rewatched the most palpable exchanges, realizing that their Congresswoman had transformed a routine forum into a watershed moment of emotional candor and political accountability. Simultaneously, media outlets began to dissect the event with surgical precision. Overnight, op-ed pages and talk shows were abuzz with analysis. Segments contrasted the liberal admiration for Jasmine's heartfelt defense of her personal history with the conservative appreciation for Caroline's relentless demands for concrete, measurable policy outcomes. The incident sparked debates in think tanks and public forums, not only about the contentious issues on stage but also about the evolving role of media in translating political encounters into viral phenomena. Scholars and commentators questioned whether such emotional displays, captured in digital detail and distributed instantaneously, could redefine political accountability in an era where every nuance is scrutinized and broadcast to millions. In the midst of the swirling discourse, one truth became irrefutable. The cameras had immortalized more than a mere political spat. They had captured an evocative, indelible moment, the collision of two resolute ideologies, the raw unveiling of personal history, and the unyielding determination of women who refused to be silenced. Every frame, every recorded second, now served as a testament to the power of direct confrontation in exposing the complexities of our political landscape. As the viral video continued to amass views and spark spirited debate across every corner of the digital world, both Jasmine and Caroline braced themselves for the consequences of this newfound focal point in national discourse. For some, the event was a turning point, a spark that would ignite continued calls for genuine reform and humanized leadership. For others, it was a stark reminder of the challenges inherent in reconciling deeply held ideological differences amid a sea of instant communication and public judgment. In that moment, as the recorded evidence of the showdown took on a life of its own online, it became clear that the battle for the hearts and minds of the nation had irrevocably moved into the realm of digital memory. A moment that began as a personal confrontation had now transformed into a public spectacle, one that would be discussed, debated, and remembered well into the future, shaping, and perhaps redefining, what it meant to speak truth to power in a divided world. After the cameras had faded into the background and the crowd's uproar slowed to a murmur of digital speculation, Jasmine found herself retreating into a solitude that contrasted sharply with the spectacle of the stage. In the hushed backstage corridors, the intensity of her earlier outbursts still clung to her like a second skin. Alone in a quiet dressing room, Jasmine sat by a solitary window, watching the reflective dark of the Washington night seep in. The raw emotion of her passionate defense, a blend of anger, pain, and determination, had rattled not only her audience but also the carefully constructed image she had long maintained. Now, doubts began creeping into the minds of those closest to her. Aides wondered if her personal vulnerability might cloud her political objectives. Supporters questioned whether the impassioned display would strengthen her message or leave it open to critique. In that vulnerable aftermath, Jasmine allowed herself just a few moments of silent introspection. The reverberations of her words mingled with the quiet hum of the empty corridor, and as the minutes passed, she felt the weight of expectation slowly settling on her shoulders. It was a rare and unguarded moment, a pause where the fire of her public defiance met the tender wounds of a lifetime of struggle. Halfway across the city, as news outlets and social media continued to dissect every fragment of that unforgettable exchange, Caroline Levitt accepted an invitation for an exclusive interview. Seated in a sunlit studio that contrasted with the dim backstage of the forum, Caroline's expression was surprisingly thoughtful. In her measured tone, she recounted the events of the day with a clarity that hinted at a deeper respect than her usual provocative banter. "There is a strength in vulnerability," Caroline remarked, her words chosen carefully as she reflected on Jasmine's outburst. "While I might challenge her policies and question her actions in a public forum, I cannot dismiss the force behind her convictions. Her willingness to expose her truth, even at the cost of personal pain, shows a level of commitment that is both admirable and, frankly, groundbreaking in our current climate." Even as Caroline reiterated the need for accountable, tangible results, her interview carried an undercurrent that suggested she was beginning to appreciate the power of dialogue over mere confrontation. In today's world of polarized opinions, genuine strength is not measured solely by the ability to fight back with statistics or rhetoric, she explained. It is also about the courage to let personal history speak in ways that compel others to listen. "While I stand firmly by my own principles, I believe that every leader, no matter their ideology, deserves acknowledgement for the battles they've fought, both in public and in private. As Caroline's words resonated through the broadcast, a subtle shift began to take shape in the broader conversation. Across newsrooms and in living rooms where discussions were held late into the night, commentators noted that this was not the typical moment of reckless politicking. Instead, it was a pause, a tentative step toward breaking down barriers that had long separated ideologies. The dialogue suggested that while the two women remained fundamentally opposed on many issues, there was space for mutual recognition, a spark that, if nurtured, might pave the way for a more constructive national debate. Back in the quiet of her dressing room, Jasmine listened to the distant echo of online discussions and the soft murmur of conflicted support. Though uncertainty still hovered over the consequences of her emotional revelation, she felt a fragile sense of relief knowing that she had bared her soul for the cause she so deeply loved. Perhaps, in the echo of her personal sacrifice, others would see that real change required more than legislative language. It required a willingness to face one's inner truths and to accept the inherent risks of genuine human connection. In that pivotal moment, as the flames of hostility began to cool into the possibility of dialogue, both Jasmine and Caroline stood at the crossroads of confrontation and conversation. Their exchange, recorded and debated across every media platform, had transcended partisan squabbles and struck a chord with a nation weary of endless conflict. The raw honesty of the day had, for the first time, hinted at a possibility that even adversaries, when stripped of their political armor, might find common ground through the unspoken respect for the struggles that had defined them. In the aftermath of the explosive public exchange, as the fervor of the forum settled into a steady hum of national debate, both Jasmine Crockett and Caroline Levitt received an invitation that neither had anticipated. A prominent national broadcaster, eager to capitalize on the monumental nature of the moment, proposed a joint television program, one that would bring these two formidable but ideologically opposed women together for a dialogue that promised to redefine the contours of political discourse. Though their views were worlds apart, both leaders recognized that without one another, the clash that had captured the nation's attention would have never ignited such a conversation. On the day of the broadcast, the atmosphere in the television studio was charged with a palpable mix of anticipation and uncertainty. The set, a modern space decorated with warm lighting and minimalist design, reflected the intention of fostering genuine conversation rather than a staged spectacle. As the cameras rolled, both women took their seats at a long, polished table that divided them only in formality. The host, a respected moderator known for navigating contentious debates with finesse, began by acknowledging the significance of their earlier confrontation, a moment that had not only split opinions but also united many in a call for honest dialogue. First, the exchange was cautious. Jasmine and Caroline offered measured remarks about the importance of clear communication and the need to address the nation's divisions. Yet, as the conversation deepened, it became evident that while they remained steadfast in their respective beliefs, there was a burgeoning mutual understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement that the full spectrum of truth could only be heard when all voices, even those in opposition, were given a platform. Though their words often diverged on specific policies and visions for the future, both women recognized that their passionate exchanges had stirred public engagement and compelled citizens to re-examine the issues at stake. Throughout the program, the dialogue swung from pointed critiques to moments of reflective pause. Caroline admitted with a measured tone that the emotion Jasmine had brought to the stage was something rare and powerful, a raw surge of personal history that transformed political rhetoric into lived experience. Jasmine, in turn, conceded that Caroline's insistence on accountability and clear policy objectives played a critical role in keeping the conversation grounded in practical realities. There were instances when the moderator's questions revealed that beneath the polarities lay shared values, the conviction that the nation's progress depended not solely on abstract ideals, but on concrete actions that benefited everyday people. As the conversation unfolded, viewers at home witnessed a transformation. What began as a potential showdown evolved into a nuanced exploration of both sides of the ideological divide. The dialogue, though occasionally heated, was punctuated by moments of surprising empathy. Each leader, while maintaining her distinct perspective, admitted that the presence of the other was essential to broadening the scope of the debate. "Without you, Jasmine declared at one point. This conversation would lack the counterpoint that forces us all to consider the complexity of the truth. Caroline, with a nod of reluctant respect, replied, and without your personal conviction, the policies we discuss might remain as hollow promises rather than lived realities. The program soon shifted from a debate of rigid stances to an exploration of common ground. They discussed how struggles, though experienced differently, had fueled both their journeys. The conversation touched on the responsibilities of leadership, the importance of understanding the hardships of those they represented, and the need to recognize that sometimes passion and pragmatism, though seemingly opposite, were indispensable parts of the same puzzle. The viewers were treated to an unexpected moment of unity, where the focus was not on defeating or outshouting one another, but on echoing the plural voices of a divided nation. In the final segment of the program, the moderator asked a poignant question. What does true strength look like when the stakes are not about defeating an opponent, but about ensuring that every facet of the truth is heard? Both Jasmine and Caroline paused, their eyes meeting across the table, a silent acknowledgement that this question encapsulated the essence of their experience. In those quiet seconds, the myriad debates, conflicts, and passionate outbursts converged into a singular truth, that the courage to engage in honest, unfiltered dialogue, regardless of ideological differences, was what truly elevated the public discourse. Drawing upon the lessons of the day, each delivered final remarks that resonated with both conviction and humility. Jasmine reminded the audience that her journey was not just a personal battle, but the story of countless individuals who had been silenced, neglected, or overlooked by systems of power. Caroline reiterated that genuine leadership required not only clarity in one's vision, but also the humility to recognize the limits of one's own perspective. Although they disagreed on many fronts, both women agreed that without open and honest dialogue, the nation would remain locked in a cycle of division and misunderstanding. As the program concluded, a final, enduring sentiment emerged from the exchange, a sentiment that both women would carry forward in their respective missions. In a joint closing statement, they declared, with voices steady and resolute, "True strength is not in defeating your opponent, but in making the world hear both sides of the truth." That evening, as the credits rolled and the cameras dimmed, the nation was left with a renewed sense of possibility. The bold confrontation that had once seemed destined only to inflame tensions had instead forged a pathway toward mutual understanding. In that moment, two women, each fierce in her commitment to her beliefs, demonstrated that even in persistent disagreement, there could exist a shared responsibility to let all voices be heard. Their courageous exchange had transformed from a clash of ideologies into a beacon of hope, a reminder that progress was born not of uniformity, but of the relentless pursuit of truth through diverse and courageous dialogue. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.